Well, we're halfway through this patch, and it's time that we kept our promise. What's going on, Pro Guides fam? Welcome back to another mid-patch update. I'm Kangas, and in this video, we'll run through how the meta has shifted as a result of this patch, and follow up on the balance changes and tweaks we've made to our tier lists. Before we get started though, I want to mention that we started a Wild Rift channel, so if you're playing the mobile game, make sure to check out the description link if you're interested. Now, let's get into the video. Beginning with the top lane, let's talk about Kayle. Absolutely broken at the start of preseason, Kayle received some hefty nerfs to her itemization, as well as a slight nerf to her passive. The result is that her win rate dropped a whopping 2% this patch, yet she's still at a 53% win rate, so she just went from super broken to normal broken. We jumped the gun and moved her down from the OP tier to the S tier. These nerfs were big, just not big enough, as she still pulls in a solid 24% of bans and will once again join Malphite as an OP pick. I'm gonna give that jump the gun line again. We jumped the gun, moving her down from the OP tier to the S tier. However, it's worth noting that Kayle might not actually be as broken as most players perceive her. It's a regional preference for sure. In the Western servers, there's no doubt that players hate her with a passion. Her win rates spike as high as 53.5% with a 55% ban rate in EU West, while in Korea, players don't really value her as much as we do. I wouldn't doubt the Koreans. After all, they were the ones that discovered a lot of OP top laners like Lulu and Soraka. Nonetheless, if you're on a Western server, it's likely that most players in your games will not know how to deal with Kayle, so just continue banning her for now. Next, let's talk about the big guy, Tryndamere. He got massive buffs. Yes, 5 AD at the beginning of the game is massive, and don't doubt it. 5 doesn't seem like a huge number, but when Tryndamere crits, it's a lot more than that. And when he crits multiple times in succession at level 1, and a part of your soul leaves your body as you lose the random numbers game, you'll begin to wonder if he really needed the buffs or not. I'm here to tell you that he did, even if you don't like him. Last patch, he was at a 43% win rate, basically an all-time low, and we just can't have that when this guy is a namesake character. His win rates have shot up significantly this patch, and he's currently sitting around 49% in Platinum and higher. The job was definitely well done, and he is playable again. So any Tryndamere enthusiasts who were and still are avoiding him like the plague, you can go ahead and give him a try again. Across all ranks, the stats are even better, as he's sitting right at the 50% mark. That's about as close to balanced as you can get. With that said, there are a couple of other shifts we did have to make. First is that Aatrox has been moved up to the A tier. Gore Drinker is an extremely powerful item with him in particular, and players have picked up on it rather quickly. While there's plenty of healing reduction in the game, forcing your opponents to build it for you is quite impactful, since you force your opponent to spend money on that utility instead of finishing the items that they would rather want to. He's proving to be a pretty consistent pick, especially when he's on the enemy team and somehow gets really fed. No idea how that happened. Rumble has been moved down to the C tier as well. As players have been playing him more and more, they've come to understand that he's in a pretty rough spot right now. A lot of his opponents can outright kill him, and there's not much he can do against all the damage and mobility that's available to top laners right now. His win rates are quite low, and his play rates are even lower. Although we haven't moved Fiora and Jax out of the S tier quite yet, we do want to mention that they are currently on the border of the S and A tiers. Compared to champions like Shen, and especially Darius, they don't have the same stable footing, and any minor nerfs to their itemization or buffs to other champions could jeopardize their spots. Speaking of which, while we moved Darius out of the OP tier list for the first time in forever last patch, that might not be the case for too long. Players have been slowly optimizing, and Stridebreaker looks like a promising mythic item on Darius. It fixes his mobility issues, and his win rates have been rising once again. We'll let you guys know if he's OP or not next patch as we continue gathering data. The conclusion right now is that there's a good chance he is, but we don't want to jump the gun just yet. You remember what we said about tanks, right? Thus, our OP picks for the top lane are Malphite and Kayle, followed up by Shen, Wukong, Darius, Camille, Maokai, Ornn, Fiora, and Jax in the S tier. Next, let's run through the jungle. In the jungle is where things are pretty much as hectic as ever. This tier list might seem absurd from first glance. Looking at the top picks and also how it's spread out just doesn't make any sense. But that's actually the point. It's preseason, and we're nowhere near a point of balance just yet. This is why we have 5 OP picks and only 2 S tier picks. All of these champions in the OP tier have absurd ban rates, somewhere around the 30% mark, with the exception of Nunu. They also all sport incredibly high win rates, which negatively impact every other jungler that isn't absolutely broken right now. As the preseason progresses, we're certain that this spread will eventually normalize and we won't get this sort of skew anymore. With that out of the way, let's talk about the two champions that received changes. First is Amumu. Even after his nerf, it actually turned out that Amumu was still OP. So Riot did the unthinkable and hotfixed him, after the patch had already gone through. In other words, he got nerfed, then nerfed again a couple of days later. In spite of this, he's still a stellar pick, and we've placed him right up there in the OP tier. His win rate has dropped significantly following these two nerfs, but he still sports an incredibly high ban rate at 55% in Platinum and higher. The nerfs to his ult were massive, however, as its stun duration now scales with ability level. He's still a solid, very high S tier at worst, but we're leaning more towards him being OP right now. The sheer tankiness combined with damage is still pretty impressive, but it's definitely noticeably weaker when compared to before. However, his dominance is global. It's not region specific, and we're confident you guys can still carry games with him, if he's not banned at least. Hecarim also received some big nerfs to his E and passive, but he's still going strong. Hecarim still holds an absurdly high ban rate at 24% and retains his spot as the 4th most played jungler in Platinum and higher. Although his win rate did drop 2%, the amount of power he holds during the draft phase is still very impressive. Players are just not comfortable playing against him because of how hard he can snowball a game. A single takedown is all it takes for him to get rolling, and compared to last season, Hecarim is still much stronger as he doesn't have to complete a jungle item and can just go straight into building his bread and butter ones instead. As for other shifts to the tier list, we've also moved Nunu up to the OP tier. His win rates have shot above 55% in Platinum and higher, and the region that loves him most is none other than Korea. Nunu's success is also a global phenomenon, but his highest play rate and ban rate is in Korea. Although Nunu sports the lowest ban rates, between 10 to 15% in our OP tier, his results justify his placement in the tier. Nunu's sustain, the increased access to healing this preseason, as well as the sheer power of Sunfire Aegis makes him a tough opponent to play against. The Thornmail buffs have also made it impossible to ignore Nunu, because he can still apply grievous wounds if he immobilizes you. Another big change was the fact that Dead Man's Plate now provides movement speed as a bonus stat, not just from its passive. This has resulted in the duo becoming much more nimble and can now maneuver through fights more effectively. We've also moved Rammus into the S tier. It's getting pretty lonely there, and he's also proving to be a pretty powerful pick overall. While he's still not as strong as the other two tanks in the OP tier, he's a close third and utilizes the new items quite well. Olaf and Rek'Sai have both been moved to the A tier as well, as players have done a better job of optimizing them and playing them as a result. Prowler's Claw and Rek'Sai is absolutely insane, while Gore Drinker makes Olaf an even stronger drain tank than before. The final change is we moved Sylas to the D tier, as his 39% win rate simply illustrates that he might be better suited for solo lanes at the moment. Thus, our OP picks for the patch are Hecarim, Graves, Kayn, Kha'Zix, Amumu, and Nunu, followed up by Evelynn and Rammus in the S tier. Now let's head on over to mid lane. For balance changes, we saw Yone and Yasuo take a hit. Well, a specific build for them at least. Guinsoo's Rageblade was providing far too much power with their passives, and the synergy was heavily nerfed as a result. Their win rates have both dropped significantly, but we've still put them into the B tier because they'll be back. Bad puns aside, the two still draw a very high amount of bans in spite of their low win rates. The potential is still there for these picks. It's likely just going to come down to optimization. We've also moved Viktor down to the S tier. The hype has died down a bit as he did get hotfixed last patch. On top of this, Luden's Tempest also got a big nerf. Specifically, the nerf to the bonus movement speed on proc has hurt Viktor quite a bit. Combined with his W, Viktor was incredibly safe with the immense amount of movement speed he could gain. While Viktor is still a very powerful pick, we don't think he compares to the 3 picks left in the OP tier. Another big shift was that we moved Kassadin all the way up from the C tier to the A tier. The buffs to tier items were massive for him. He can realistically stack them up with his changes, and this alone has brought him back from the depths. Same thing with Ryze. His win rate increased by a little more than 3% this patch, and we bumped him up to the B tier as a result. Finally, we've moved Diana down to the A tier. Her popularity and win rates are passable, but not enough to fit in with the rest of the S tier, and we're just cleaning up the list with this change to make sure that there's some consistency. Our OP picks for the mid lane are Zed, Akali, and Fizz, followed up by Viktor, Echo, Annie, Katarina, Galio, Malphite, and Kayle. Kayle's win rates are actually almost high enough to place her into the OP tier. However, as her mid lane play rates are a bit lower, it's tough to say whether or not her win rates are because of players' inexperience laning versus her, or if she's just better suited for the center of the map. The mid lane does provide less gold, however, so we presume that farm lanes in the top lane are more ideal for the champion, as she'll be able to hit her power spikes a bit faster. That's it for the mid lane, so let's hop into the bot lane next. For the bottom lane, we honestly don't have too much to report on. First up, Samira did get nerfed, but like you'd expect, the player base doesn't really care. Her ban rate still stands at an absurd 75%. Her kit is particularly powerful because of how self-sufficient she is, and that in itself provides a lot of power. Even though she did get nerfed, Samira is going strong and will remain as an OP pick. For what it's worth, however, this nerf did lower Samira's win rate in Platinum and higher by a full 2%. Her passive was nerfed this patch, both the damage ratio and the dash range, and while this nerf wasn't huge, her ban rate has actually gone up a bit, and the fact that you're so rarely able to play her nowadays is likely dragging down her win rate. Fun fact though, North America is actually underperforming with her significantly. I'm going to give us a little break, however, because of how far spread the server is. She's quite an intense champion, and even a little bit of lag can ruin the whole experience. In Korea, for example, Samira's ban rate is 86%, probably a reflection of what players perceive when they see her at peak performance. The other champion who received a balance change was Varus. Varus's win rates have actually dropped, but he did receive various shifts of power. As he stands right now, Varus is definitely underperforming, but we don't think it's because he's weak. We think he's just not optimized yet, and given his need for what's likely a hybrid damage build now, it's probably going to take some time before players really figure it out. The one shift we did have to make to the tier list, however, is that we've dropped Caitlyn down to the A tier. Her win rates in Platinum and higher are currently around 47%, and while that's low, players still like to default to her because she's rather safe and you'll at least be able to play the laning phase on even ground. The ability to blind pick her still merits Caitlyn as a viable pick, but she's far from being an S tier pick at the moment. Thus, our OP picks are Samira, Jhin, and Vayne, followed up by Ashe, Draven, Ezreal, Miss Fortune, and Kai'Sa in the S tier. That'll conclude the bottom lane, so let's wrap it up with support. Now's a good time for our question of the day. Have you been playing more ranked or normal games during the preseason? The preseason has brought back a lot of my friends to the game, and I've actually been playing way more unranked games than ranked ones so that I can play with them. After all, preseason rank isn't the most important thing, but I want to know what all of you have been doing these past few weeks. Maybe ranked is too stressful. Maybe you want to grind up a Smurf instead. Or maybe you still prefer playing seriously. Hit me below with your answers in the comments below. While supports saw no direct buffs or nerfs, we did get a buff to Moonstone Renewer. We're here to give you guys updates on the support meta as a result. Systems changes affect a role and the game altogether, so there are a few things worth mentioning. First off, it definitely still feels like Imperial Mandate is just the superior item for most enchanters. It deals ridiculous amounts of damage, and having impact as a support has never been easier than with this item. There are two specific champions, however, who have benefited heavily from the buffs to Renewer. Those are Sona and Yuumi. Didn't bump down the tier list. There's no doubt that they're both stronger than before, but they're just not performing at the same level as the S tier picks just yet, so we can't make any shifts to the list for them. However, we do think that they're both undervalued at the moment, and there's a good chance that they're slept on right now. Just for fun though, we did go ahead and add a pick for all of you trolls out there. I'm sure you guys have probably seen him in at least one of your games by now, but AP Support Twitch has been lurking in the shadows. Here and there you'll see him pop out, but he seems to fall short of success pretty regularly. His low win rates and play rates would imply that, and while innovative, it might just not be the best move. Maybe with some optimization, however, it can end up pretty good. Throw in a tank that wants to farm, or maybe some unconventional bot laner with him, and the potential is definitely there. Right now though, it feels like Twitch needs to get some random kills to become relevant, and we'll need to give him some time to develop. It's also a relatively new playstyle as well, so I'm sure his win rates will rise as players get more practice with him. Our OP tier and S tier remain unchanged, with Leona and Lulu at the top, followed by Thresh, Bard, Morgana, Nami, Janna, Alistar, Brand, Pantheon, and Nautilus in the S tier. Well, that'll conclude our mid-patch update for patch 10.24. Thanks all so much for watching. If you got any thoughts or feedback, let us know in the comments down below, because yes, we do read them. I also want to make sure that you all check out ProGuides.com if you're trying to improve, because you're not going to find better coaches and you're not going to find better classes anywhere online. As always, good luck on the Rift, stay hydrated, and wash your hands.